Good evening. Welcome to the Landis Arboretum. My name is George, and this is the last of my programs for the year, so to speak. I do programs usually 2 a month here at the Arboretum, starting in April with Spring Hawk Watch and ending every year, or ending the warm seasons with this Halloween Owl Prowl. Tonight's the Halloween's Eve, and we're going to go out and call for owls. But for those of you that are not familiar with the Landis Arboretum, let me give you a little bit of an introduction. The Landis Arboretum is a not-for-profit organization. It's located in Esperance, New York. An arboretum is a living museum of trees. I forget now how many acres, about 300 some odd acres here at the Arboretum, with some wildlands. That's where I usually hang out with my programs, but an extensive collection of trees from all over the world, the temperate climates, of course, no palm trees here. There are also perennial gardens and a variety of other plant-related features. For example, there's a small bog plant exhibit, essentially a miniature bog. A variety of many trails to hike on, lots of places to explore. It's a not-for-profit organization made up of a very few number of very dedicated professional staff, but primarily driven by volunteers. So if you enjoy tonight, or if you've come along in some of my other programs, I invite you to look into the organization, become a member. You can always provide donations. We're always searching for donations. We need help with lots of different activities, and of course, just being a part of this community that values trees and values what we have here at the Arboretum. The Arboretum is called the Landis Arboretum, named after George Landis, who was a very close friend of Fred Lape. The Arboretum property itself is the Lape family farm, and the two men were very interested in trees. They collected trees from all over the world and planted them here. And when George Landis passed away, he gave his estate to Fred for establishing an arboretum that could be visited by all. So tonight we're going to be calling for owls. I can't guarantee that we'll even hear any owls, much less see them. It's very likely we won't see them. But I'm hoping that we might hear them. Matter of fact, when I got here this evening, about 15-20 minutes ago, I started doing some hoots. I was doing a few barred owl hoots, and I did get a response, not from owls, but from coyotes. So we'll see if those coyotes are still yowling as we go along. But to start off with, I'd like to just explore the possibility that you could go and do your own owl prowls. Part of my personal philosophy is that to enjoy the outdoors, you don't need an expert. I have teachers and many people say, oh, you're an expert. I'm not an expert. I like to think of this. I know a little bit about a lot of things, but there's many questions that I have. There's many things that happen that I wonder, what is going on? It's part of this, to me, it's a treasure hunt, looking for the wonders of nature. And of course, owls are very attractive to people. There's many myths and stories about owls. And of course, at Halloween time, owls become even more predominant. So the thing is you could go out and do your own owl prowl. So I'd like to share with you a little bit of some of the things you might think about. And then we'll go out and I will take you along on this virtual owl prowl. It's going to be pretty dark out, so at some point, it's pretty much what you're watching on the screen is going to be actually darker than if you were actually here. I'm hoping next year this virus situation will be solved and we'll be open again for having in-person activities where people actually come along. And I would take you out in the woods and we would call for owls. So how would you do this? Well, the first thing is, what owls are we going to be looking at? There's 3 different owls that are the ones that we will be venturing to investigate today. Here they are. Let me just I'll take my camera over in here so we can get a close look in here. And so we have the eastern screech owl, which is going to be our smallest owl. There is a smaller owl that lives in New York State called the northern saw-whet owl, but it's extremely secretive. Matter of fact, right now there is a breeding bird atlas effort going on. In this case, citizen scientists, some are professional ornithologists and others are people very interested in birds, are taking the time to investigate what birds actually nest in New York State. There's certain protocols that we have to try to figure that out. If the birds are actually on territory in nesting season, that's one possibility. If you see them carrying nesting material, another possibility. If you see them mating, yet another category that says, yes, they're nesting here. And of course, if you were to find the nest and see the babies in the nest. So the eastern screech owl, or excuse me, the northern saw-whet owl, if you look in the past breeding bird atlases, it hardly shows up as nesting in New York. And yet we do know it's here. It's just that it's so secretive, it's very hard to find them. The eastern screech owl is then one of our owls. It's the smallest owl we'll be calling tonight. I have never heard an eastern screech owl here at the Arboretum, which has me befuddled because I live just down the road about 8 miles from here, and I know I have eastern screech owls in my woods. So I keep on wondering, why aren't they here? So when we start off, we're going to be looking for the eastern screech owl in a corner area where I think if there's any of them around, they might be there. How big is the eastern screech owl? You can't see from this photo because there's nothing to judge scale, other than the fact that this is an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. But if I had an eastern screech owl, it could actually fit in my hand. So right there, that's about the actual size of an eastern screech owl. Very small owl. The biggest owl that we'll be looking for is the great horned owl. The great horned owl is called a horned owl because it has these feather tufts on its head. Looks like horns. They're not its ears either. Actually, the ears are very much like you and me on the sides of the head, sort of lined up with the eyes. Owls have incredibly good hearing. Matter of fact, studies have been done, and we know that an owl can locate its prey in total absolute darkness. I'm not even talking about a moonlit night or a night that's got starlight where your eyes might be able to, the owl's eyes could adjust to the light. In a completely darkened experimental room, scientists have placed a habitat situation of dead leaves on the floor and released mice that run around. And in a totally perfectly dark, completely dark room, owls can swoop down and catch those mice based on the sounds that mice make as they move around. The great horned owl is much bigger. Let me give you an example of size of a great horned owl. So if we are looking at me here, a great horned owl will be about this tall. So top of my head to about over in here with a 4-foot wingspan, okay? So this is about 3 feet here, so add over here. That's about 4 foot, 4-foot wingspan right there. It's the largest owl that we have here all year round. There are some bigger owls that sometimes come down in the wintertime. The snowy owl is about the size of a great horned owl. But the biggest owl of North America is called the great gray owl. And every now and then we do have what we call an eruption of great gray owls, that they will move from the far north and be found here in New York State. That's the largest owl. No chance of a great gray tonight. Great horned owls and screech owls favor woodland type of habitats. They do also fly over fields and looking for mice and prey in fields. But as I tell the kids, they like to live in a habitat of woods and fields and woods and fields. The third owl of New York that is our common owl, a likely candidate to hear, is the barred owl. It's called the barred owl because of these colorations of light and dark bars on the front of its chest. The barred owl is an owl that I always associate with more of the woods, like, for example, the Adirondacks. This past summer, I was camping out on Utowana Lake, right in the middle of the Adirondacks near Racket Lake, well, pretty much between Racket Lake and Blue Mountain Lake. And we had barred owls hooting up a storm and very reactive to us. They're actually the owl that is, I find, the most reactive to any kind of calling for them. That's right, we're going to call for them. How do we find these owls? Well, birds make noises and sounds. Owls, we generally call them calls, not songs. And you might be thinking, oh, that's right, George. They go, ooh. Well, I like to say, let's think about that. You see, owls can make a variety of sounds. Here I have a CD of bird calls and bird songs. This is the Peterson Guide to Bird Songs. It accompanies the Field Guide, the Eastern Field Guide to Eastern Birds. And I have my CD player set up for this. Now, if you were going to do this outdoors in your own park, maybe your backyard, maybe you have a backyard that has woods around and some open spaces, but large-sized trees, maybe beyond is more even a bigger section of trees, or maybe you're close to a park with lots of trees. A good chance you might have eastern screech owls there. But before we get to that, the owl's calls and sounds, we think, ooh, ooh, like that. Well, listen to this owl. This is the first owl that's on the CD for this section on owls. And this is the short-eared owl. The short-eared owl is an owl that's present in New York. It's actually one of the owls where ornithologists and biologists have concerns about. Their numbers seem to be going down. We don't know exactly why. Part of it is the fact that the short-eared owl is a grassland owl, and we are losing our grassland habitats. We're losing them because, well, for one thing is grassland properties that were farmlands, obviously in some places are being developed for housing. But even if they're not being developed for housing, farmers are getting out of the agricultural business, particularly dairy farmers. And what happens then to those hay fields and pasture fields when a farmer is no longer farming them? Nature has its way of moving on. We call it succession. And what happens then is those grasslands become shrublands and brushlands, eventually become forests. The short-eared owl is not an owl of brush or forest. It likes these open grasslands. But listen to the short-eared owl. Here is short-eared owl's call.
Short-eared owl.
Can you believe that? That is an owl. The short-eared owl has a squeaky bark. So not all owls hoot. The eastern screech owl does not have a squeaky bark like the short-eared owl. Neither does it hoot. It actually has a call that's more of a whistle. Why it's called a screech owl, I don't know. I have some ideas, but I've never read about anything of where it's called a screech owl. But its call sometimes might be screechy like, but to me it's a whistle. They have a whistle that sounds like a horse whinnying. And they have a whistle that's a trilling whistle, sort of a, or a whistle like this. You go. If you really want to make it sound like it, what you need to do is build up a whole bunch of spit in your mouth. Really good way to do that is hot chocolate. So sometimes I do an owl prowl, and the organizing group has some hot chocolate afterwards, and drink some of that. Make sure saliva very gooey, because what you need to do is build up a whole bunch of saliva in your mouth, so it sits upon your tongue, sort of a pool of it, and then when you whistle, it waves over that pool of saliva, and it changes the structure of the whistle into a wavering sound, like this. Going to build up some spit in my mouth. Yeah, you have to sort of tip your head up so you don't have all that spit coming out. Here's the actual whistling of the screech owl, recording of it.
Eastern screech owl.
Sounds a lot like a horse whinnying, especially if it's way off in the woods. There's that trill. So same way the whole way through. So, the eastern screech owl is an owl that has that whistling call. Again, I find we do have screech owls here. I've never heard one at the Arboretum. Keep my fingers crossed, maybe tonight we will. The great horned owl and the barred owl, both are owls that have hooting kinds of calls. But again, you have to be careful with what is a hooting call. For example, I will be doing a nature walk or be talking to some people with a nature program, and someone will come up and go, George, I heard an owl in the middle of town, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Middle of town, that's not the right habitat. 2 o'clock in the afternoon? I'm not going to say an owl never hoots at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I have heard owls hooting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but it's not the usual situation. So now I'm going, really? Did it sound like this? So yeah. It's not an owl. Many birds have cooing, hooting kinds of calls. That kind of sound is from the mourning dove. Mourning as in mourning, sad and crying. So we need to listen carefully to the kind of hoots. Here's an example. This is the long-eared owl. I have only once ever seen living long-eared owls here in New York, but the long-eared owl is, again, a resident of New York, but again, not a very common owl, not like these three that you are very likely to have in or nearby your backyard, the great horned owl, the barred owl, or the eastern screech owl. Here is the long-eared owl. Listen carefully to this guy.
Long-eared owl.
That single woo, woo. I might try that tonight. I know that Ann Donnelly, one of the Arboretum's volunteers and board members, she has them in her backwoods in Cobleskill, not that far away. So there's a possibility. I've not usually tried to call them, but maybe I'll try tonight. That just single woo, woo, like that. The great horned owl's hoot is a series of 4 or 5 or 6 hoots that vary. Some are long, some are short, some are loud, some are soft, and very much akin to this. I often cover my mouth because to me, it's a much deeper kind of call. And it's a woo, 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 woo. Here's an actual recording, because great horned owl calls, as in any bird's calls, can vary from region to region. I read one time where a scientist or ornithologist who specializes in great horned owl studies can actually tell what part of the country a recording was made in because of the accent that the owl has. And you can think about it, birds learn their calls much like humans do. We listen to other humans when we're very little, and we begin to imitate. And birds do a very similar kind of thing. So if you're hearing a certain kind of accent, you would be learning that. Well, here is a recording of the great horned owl's call.
Great horned owl.
That's the babies. Babies don't know how to talk yet, and they're complaining, wanting food to be fed by mom or dad, and so they squawk like that. Perhaps that's the reason why the eastern screech owl is called a screech owl. It looks like a little baby great horned owl, you might say. And when you hear that screeching sound, you might think, ooh, this little guy here is a baby one of these guys. So maybe they called it a screech owl. I don't know. That's my guess about it. The great horned owl, a series of hoots like that. I have heard great horned owls here at the Arboretum. I'm not promising anything. Keep my fingers crossed. Again, this is a treasure hunt. You never know what we might find. And finally, the last owl before we hit the trail to try to see if we can get some owls to respond to us is the barred owl. Again, this is an owl, if you go camping up in the Adirondacks or the Catskills, It's definitely the owl you want to be listening for, or perhaps even calling. I have found, matter of fact, the barred owl is the very first owl I ever had to respond to one of my calls. The barred owl is very responsive. I've had barred owls when I've been camping out with a small campfire. I'm not talking about a big bonfire, but just a small campfire you might have at your campground with your tent or your lean-to site. And hear a barred owl far on the far side of a lake or down the river a little bit or off in the woods a ways. And by hooting to it, I've actually had them fly out and come out to even where there's a campfire. Not right at the campfire, of course, but way up high in the tree. Matter of fact, one time in Gloversville at the Willie Marsh, I was hooting for owls, didn't hear anything. And so as I'm walking out from the marshland area to travel the 200 or 300 yards to my car, I start to hear an owl hooting, a barred owl hooting from where I had originally been. So I started hooting to it, and it got closer and closer. By the time I got to my car, the barred owl had followed me out of the woods and was right at the edge of the woods in this gravel parking lot where my car was parked. I walked to the far side of the parking lot, hooted, it flew across and landed on the trees on the far side of the parking lot, hooted to me. I walked back and forth a few times hooting, it followed me back and forth, and finally I decided, okay, I'll let you win. What's going on when these owls are hooting is they're declaring their territory. They're looking for mates, or they've established a territory, and they're basically saying, well, who are you? What are you doing here? So I figured I would let this owl win the argument. And I got in my car and headed on off, and that owl, I'm presuming, would say, okay, well, chase that intruder out of my territory. The barred owl has a series of hoots that the books describe it saying, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? Sort of like this. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? Except for it's really like this. Here's the actual recording of the barred owls, or a recording.
Bard's owl.
Listen carefully. There's two owls involved, at least two owls. And what's going on? Again, it sounds to me like there is an argument over territory. These recordings here are recordings at the Laboratory of Ornithology at Cornell. It has, the laboratory has the largest collection of recordings of nature sounds. Not just birds, but also amphibians, insects, frogs, of course, all these different animals that make different sounds. And I'm guessing that the ornithologists, when they made the recording, perhaps they started getting the owls hooting by their own voice. And then what happened was, I think that the recorder was between two different owl territories, and the family of owls here started hooting it up, and the family of owls over there started hooting it up, having a disagreement as to sort of that territorial boundary. I should speak and mention of this, that the playing of the actual recordings can be detrimental to birds. At this time of year, there is no nesting going on, so if you were to actually play a recording to see if there were owls in your park or backyard, you're not going to be disturbing their plans or their attempts at nesting. But when you're playing an actual recording, it's an actual recording of a bird's songs. The birds recognize this, and if you keep on playing a recording in one place over and over and over again, any of those of that species that may have decided to try to nest there, you might actually be chasing them off by basically saying, with your recording over and over again, that this is a more dominant bird, and the bird then might say, okay, I can't outcompete this songster that's hooting and whistling and singing with me, and I'm going to go and find someplace else to nest. So you do need to be aware of using recordings like this. And matter of fact, in some birding events and some birding expeditions and things, they do not use recordings at all. particularly in the spring and summertime when nesting is going on. You might say, oh, but I'm only going to play it once or twice. And especially if you're doing this at a public place where other people might be coming to listen for the very same bird. Because you go there and you play it once or twice or 3 times, and then you leave. And you said, okay, I only played it 3 times. But you don't know that maybe a half an hour before you were there, someone came in and played the very same recordings or similar recordings 2 or 3 times with the same intention in mind that you had. And then maybe half an hour after you've left, another person comes in, particularly if you have a bird that's got a very definite, restricted habitat. Hooting for owls with a recording like this in a general woods kind of setting, the owls have many places they can move to. Probably not as crucial as going to a marshland, which is a very restricted kind of habitat, and trying to get birds' reactions by playing calls of the birds that would be in that marshland. So part of your concern is the kind of habitat that's there, how restricted is it, how much is the species you're playing is dependent upon that very strict kind of habitat. If you have a generalist bird that can live just any place, for example, house sparrows. Of course, first off, they're invasive, non-native birds, but a house sparrow has any place they can pick. If you're playing a house sparrow song in your backyard, the house sparrows are responding to it, and you move them off, they're probably just going to go to the other side of your property or their neighbor's house and find a place to nest there. So you do need to be concerned about using the calls like this. So here we are. Let's go. My plan is to spend at least a half an hour in the woods. If you need to take a bathroom break, good thing about these virtual programs, you can just hop on off and then jump back in. We'll see if we can get any responsive owls. I'm going to leave all these materials in here. I'm going to use my voice and my whistling. I've done this many times. So I'm not bringing any recordings out. I have a flashlight I can use. And let's go. I'm going to try to do screech owls over at the meeting house pond. It's a little bit more of an edge area. There's actually a nest box there. And we'll see if we can get any response there. Before I head on off, let's just see who we have here visiting. And we have quite a few people. Hello, Cindy. Yep, come along on this one. Yes, it's a virtual one. Oop, listen. That's a Canada goose, I believe. Where is it? No, it's not. It sounds like a goose, but it's not moving. I'd expect Canada goose. Could it be mammal? It does sound mammalian. I should go investigate it. And hello, Laura and Kathy. You have a whole bunch. What is that? I'm going to see if it's a barred owl. I've never heard a barred owl doing that kind of sound. I usually don't use a bright light. I know some people do, but I'm going to grab a light in my car and see if that put that guy off from what it was saying. And someone's dog is reacting to the sounds they're hearing on this online. And Nina says cats also. Hello, Lois. Will and Lois Asher, thanks for coming along. This animal that was calling has quieted down. Truck passing by. It did not sound great horned owl like, but I'm going to try my great horned owl call. The call was from over in this area here. I often like to look up through the sky, up at the trees. There's the full moon. Tomorrow's a full moon. And you can see this full moon here. But if an owl flies in, they'll be silhouetted against the trees. Matter of fact, the photograph I used for the announcing of this program was exactly what happened. I was doing a Christmas bird count with one of my environmental education friends, Alan Mapes, and we were in a section in Cohoes, pretty much right in the city, although it was in a more suburban part of the city, in an area that couldn't be developed because it was a steep ravine of woodlands. And we'd had great horned owls calling, and a spot that we'd often had screech owls. I was whistling, and we were looking, and the screech owl flew in, and I only would have known it was there by seeing it fly in, because it never whistled back. And I took a picture with my point and shoot, and that's what came out. It was silhouetted against the dawn, the soon-to-break dawn sky, and the flash made its eyes shine. But my barred owls put this thing off, whatever it was. I will have to listen again to this to try to make sense of it. At first it sounded mammalian, but then it started sounding bird-like. Well, let's go over to the Meeting House Pond, and we will whistle some more there and see if we get a response. There is a nest box. The screech owls live or nest in hollow trees, openings and holes in trees. It may not be a full hole. It could be just a broken off snag of a tree, a little split in two branches. But they often will take up residence in wood duck nest boxes that are made for wood ducks to nest in. Yes, there's a duck that nests inside a hole in a tree, and that would be the wood duck. But the screech owls will make use of that. So I'm not going to go through the tall grass, which is quite wet and snowy. And I'm going to call from here, and let's see if we can if we've got any response from an eastern screech owl. some people ask me, George, isn't it bad to do that screech owl call? It's a little baby, smallish owl, and then you do a barred owl. Wouldn't they be scared? It's an interesting point, and I'm sure, well, I know for a fact that bigger species of owls will eat smaller species of owls. But I also know for a fact that I have had varying owls living in woodland settings that I have visited. So at home, I know I have barred owls, gray horned owls, and screech owls all within sound of my house, which means within sound of each other, so that they somehow decide or find a way to get along. Or maybe I should say, maybe the smaller owls have a way of trying to be aware of staying away from the larger owls. So I do a mix of calls, mostly to try to get a response when I have a group of people visiting or following along, or if I'm doing something with a, say, a Christmas bird count or a bird survey, or a big day where I'm trying to find if there's any particular species in one place. I said I might try to do that long-eared owl. And what's got me thinking now is I'm looking over at the meeting house. There's the meeting house off in the distance. I don't know if it's going to be in focus in here. There's a focus of it. I was playing the recordings in the meeting house, and the owl or whatever that was calling back was not even 200 feet away from the meeting house, and the door was open. I'm wondering if it was responding to some of those calls that I was playing in the meeting house. Woo! 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 Can you hear that? Coyotes are calling back. I don't know if you can hear them. They're quite a ways off. Woo! 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 What I usually suggest is to spend 5 or 10 minutes at one spot doing whichever calls you're going to do, or whistles, whichever you're going to do. And again, I say I go through doing them all, and then moving on to another spot. So in a short bit, I think we'll move on to the woodland trail and move a fair bit down the trail before I hoot and whistle again. I'm probably going to do 1, 2, maybe 3 spots, working our way to the oak tree where the old white oak was, and where our mascot oak is today, which is a red oak. But I could hear those coyotes responding. Jet planes. One thing I don't hear anymore are any of the insect life. This little cold snap and snow has, I think, quieted down any of those last crickets. Just 2 or 3 nights ago at home, I was hearing tree crickets and field crickets. No katydids. The katydids have been done for quite a while. So I'm going to go down this trail, and I'm going quite a ways into the woods. Since I don't have a group with me, I can sort of move along very quickly to spots and try to call. So that's an advantage of doing this virtual program. And if you're still along with me and you have questions or comments, you can type them in, and I will check them every now and then to see if there are any questions or comments as we do this. But I know with the light conditions here, there's enough moonlight I can easily see where I'm going without having any additional light. But here on the screen, it looks very dark. So whenever we stop, I think I'll try to point the camera up towards the moon, which we can have maybe see it through the trees in here. So I'm on the woodland trail, which starts off at a higher elevation and then drops down. There's a porcupine area. I think I saw on the Facebook page for the Arboretum that there were some porcupine photos of the porcupine tree. So I'll go down this area over in here. We'll get deeper in the woods, and I'll try doing the barred owl call. When I did my full moon night walk a couple months ago, I did have barred owls that were calling, but they were quite a ways off. Let's see if we get any response over in here. And let's see here. Samantha asks, what is a northern saw-whet owl sound like? They have what is very similar. Matter of fact, this is not a bad place for me to do it. There are some evergreens. I'm in the section here on the top where there's some hemlocks. The northern saw-whet particularly likes evergreens, and they do a series of toots, sort of like some people sound similar to the backup toots on trucks and buses that we have. So a series like this. They do about 2 toots a second. The name saw-whet comes from yet another call that the saw-whet owls make, and I cannot reproduce it. If you were to take a saw, a regular hand saw, one of those ones with a flat blade, not a power saw, take one of those, and you were to bend it and sort of make it vibrate, you get this sort of a woo kind of call. I've heard saw-whets do that once, and then that's what drew my attention to it. But then as I was whistling, it actually flew to us and began whistling almost, it was so dark we couldn't see it all. You couldn't even see your hands in front of you. And the saw-whet then started tooting right above us. It sounded like it was probably not even 10 feet above our heads in some spruce boughs in a completely darkened woods. Let me try the eastern screech owl. try the barred owl. I hear neighborhood dogs barking back. Not an unusual thing if you're to do this in your own backyard and community or a parkland in a more settled setting. These owls can live, the screech owl in particular, and to some extent the gray horned owl can often live in quite fairly developed areas as long as there's woodlands, large trees with cavities and holes in it. There's a possibility of both of those. The barred owl, not so much, although again, I've seen barred owls in fairly developed areas. I'm not talking about a city, but you're definitely not talking about, you know, vast woodlands like the Adirondacks, where you're definitely going to encounter barred owls. A lot of dogs barking back. Let's move on down the trail. I have to describe the trail here. We have boughs bowing down, well, tree branches bowing down, coated with snow. Here in the highland, we had a fair bit of snow. Actually, quite a bit of it's melted. At home, I live about 8 miles from here. We had almost 2 inches of snow this morning when we got up. Still have lots of snow here on the ground, here in the woods. The trail is very easy to see because the snow is melted on the trail where it's wetter. It's a gorgeous evening tonight here. A little chilly, not that cold. The best thing is no wind. If we have wind, it definitely affects at least our human ability to hear the owls. I'm not sure if the owls just quiet down themselves, but I know that when I've had windy conditions, I very seldom hear any owl activity. So we're coming down, if you're familiar with the Woodland Trail, we're coming down from the top, and pretty soon we'll be on the bottom part of the trail. The meeting house is on this little knoll. It makes it a nice spot for the spring hawk watch because essentially it's a knoll that is pointing to the south as the Schoharie bends around. And in the fall or in the spring, when the hawks are migrating back northward, many times they follow different corridors, and a great north-south corridor to follow are the rivers we have. And so they'll be flying up and following the Schoharie and have a chance that we can spot them as they fly past. So we got down the bottom, and in a short bit, maybe about another 100 yards or so, I'll stop and we'll do some more hooting and whistling. And again, this is a section of hemlocks, so I might start with that saw-whet call that you were asking about. We're right in a deep section of hemlocks. Matter of fact, there's so much hemlocks here, there's no snow on the ground because the hemlock branches block the snow. Such a quiet and still night. Let me try screech owl. So I'll try long-eared owl. Woo! 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 Even if I could do short-eared owl, this is not the habitat for short-eared owls. An interesting note on short-eared owls is they are an owl that's actually active during daylight time. Not at noon, but at this time of year, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, as the sun is starting to get low in the sky and it's starting to get a little bit darker. It's still not yet sunset. The short-eared owls can, if you have any around, will be seen flying and gliding over open field areas. We're right now in the middle of a woods, so I would not expect short-eared owls here. To be honest, I don't know where they nest. I'd have to do some research. Whether they nest on the ground in grassland areas, I'm not sure. I know they'll roost in trees near grassland areas. Here's a barred owl call. I need to work on my you all part. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? You hear dogs barking off in the distance. Great horned owl call. That's a barred owl calling back. Responded to that great horned owl call. I'll try the great horned owl again. That barred owl is probably 100 feet away. It might come in and get really close. Sometimes they get really excited like that. He's right nearby. I'm looking up in the sky to see if I can see him. I'm going to move down the trail just a wee bit and then call again, and maybe he'll follow. Here's an open area. There's some sky right there. I'm going to tip the camera up so you can see the sky. He's right there, hooting. Woo, 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 woo. I'm going to tip the camera up. Oh, that's the most I can get. I have to tip it this way. I have to do it right down. I'll just hold it. See if I can get it up this way. Woo, 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 woo. I'm gonna come down this way here and see if he'll come out to one of these trees. See if I can get some moonlight against the background of these trees. Woo, 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 woo. There's the trees there. He's off in that direction. Well, you can't see what I can see. It's all dark on my screen. I can get a little bit of skylight over in here because that's where the moon is. But he's off to our right from this view here. It's funny, he's not doing the you all part. He's just doing the who cooks for you, who cooks for you. See if he'll fly in thinking there's a screech owl for dinner. Woo, 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 woo. Doesn't seem to be moving. I hear dogs in the distance. Woo, 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 woo. Well, I'm going to work my way back over, around. I'm going to skip the mascot oak and go towards the woodland pond and see if there might be screech owls there, or maybe this barred owl will follow us. So we go down the trail a little bit more. I'll hoot a few more times. It's quiet right now. Let's see. If I stop in here, you can sort of just barely see the openings in the trees. Woo, 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 woo. Yeah. When owls fly, they make no sound with their wings. You don't hear that flap, 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 flap. You'll hear a bird when birds fly by. Or if you've ever heard like pigeons flying past, there's a whistling in their wings. Owl feathers have special filaments at the very leading edge of the feathers that help to muffle that wind action as the wings cut through the air. And they do that. It's an adaptation so that they can fly and still be listening for hunting as they're flying. Because remember, as they're flying, they might be listening as much as looking for prey that would be in the woods. I'm going to try to keep my eyes open for the right-hand turn. That is the turnoff from this trail that goes towards the pond, the woodland pond. The barred owl has become quiet. I think I'll do a great horned owl call when I get up this way a little bit further. As I said, this is always an adventure. You never know what you might hear or see. We started off with that strange call in the trees right near the meeting house. And we had some coyotes responding. I'm not sure if anyone could hear them. They were quite a distance off. And that barred owl. I've got some boughs to have to work my way around. They're laden down. The trees still have leaves on them. And so the snow on the leaves have the branches bending way down to the ground in areas normally you wouldn't have to duck down at all. So we're coming up the hill a little bit. Pretty soon there'll be the turnoff to go to the woodland pond. Up in here, I think I'll try doing a great horned owl call. Closer to the field area, which sometimes is where great horned owls like to be, the edge of woods and fields. Very quiet. hear the train, which I think is the train in the Mohawk Valley. Oops. There's a branch there. Yep, that's, I believe, the train. That's the Mohawk Valley train. So we're coming out to where the pond is, which allows, again, a little bit more habitat maybe for a screech owl. There's some nest boxes here for wood ducks. So Kathy asks, what does a barn owl sound like? The barn owl, from what I know of the barn owl, has a hunting call. That's a very screechy hunting call. Sort of a kind of call. And when you hear it on the tape, the recording, when I do this with kids, they're sitting quietly listening, there's often this little start that they have because it's sort of surprising. And I often wonder, is that what the owl is doing when it's silently flying over a field? The barn owl is a field owl. They live in barns, which would be near farm fields. Of course, they can live in the edge of town in old buildings, but again, more open grassland countries. And if they're flying along very silently and they make this crazy sound, maybe a mouse does a little bit of a start or a shuffle and makes a little noise in the leaves or in the dry grass, and that's what the owl hears to swoop down and get it. There's the moon. See if I can, oops, trying to focus in on the moon, but it went dark. Huh, my camera won't pick up even the moonlight now. It's poking through the clouds, unfortunately. Well, there's a little bit of moonlight. Huh, why was I getting moonlight there? Oh, I know what. Did I switch it around? I may have switched. That's what I've done. The camera now is on me, but I can't see where I would switch it back. See, there's my hand right there saying there's the moon right there. And so that's the moon right there. And I've heard barred owls do that, where they have this whole cacophony of sounds. I think that's where the term hootenanny comes from. If you remember from the old TV program, song and review kind of TV show called Hootenanny. So, well, since, let's see, I don't know if I show up in here. We tip this way. Oh, there's my silhouette. I think you have a little silhouette of me. So, I would like to thank you for coming along. And we did have that one barred owl very close in. It hooted back quite a few times. No responses from any other owls. But thanks. Keep hearing things, but I think that's just a jet plane flying by. But thank you for coming along this evening. Happy Halloween. Just as a heads up, I do believe there, hopefully, well, it depends a lot on what happens with the virus and social distancing issues and things like that. But the Arboretum usually schedules one snowshoe program a month, starting in December, January, and February. I believe, I might be wrong, but go to the Arboretum website to see if you want to do a snowshoeing program. It's basically nature walk on snowshoes. If there's no snow, we just do a nature walk around. I usually lead one or two of them. Fred does maybe one or two, maybe Ann does one, depends. We sort of mix it up and do different duties. But check the website. Again, I mentioned that the Arboretum is a not-for-profit organization. If you're watching this and you think, oh, that's cool, and you have a little bit of discretionary money that you can help out, definitely pay dues and become a member, or just outright give a donation. You can do that online. If there's any questions, go to the Arboretum's website and you can pull up a question and ask questions there. As far as my programs, I continue to do on my Facebook page, that's George Joseph Steele Facebook page, I continue to do my Sunday night science story time. I'm thinking I might do something for the city of Amsterdam where I live. It's an Amsterdam mailing address. I live out in the country. But I might do something along the lines of the nature of Amsterdam. Maybe I'll start off with an exploration of the critters that might live in the pond and stream at the Shuttleworth Park. Maybe do some things with animal tracks in snow and a variety of other things that are coming up. So I would like to just do my typical so long, my just recognizing who stopped by and see if there's any last comments. You're welcome, Terry. Thanks for coming in. And Julie Klein, thank you for coming along. Will, Asher, and Lois Asher, thanks again for joining me. Kathy, I tried to help you on that barn owl sound. Google it, you'll find it. The only sound I have, I know on my CD, the Peterson Guide, there is that hunting squawk is the best way to describe it. And Anne-Marie, thanks for stopping by. Danielle, and Samantha Ballard. And again, I tried to do the saw-whet call, but you can go and Google that and find it. It's a very interesting bird. It's the cutest thing you can, they're just amazing birds. Very tamish, because they depend so much on their camouflage. Anne-Marie, and thanks for stopping by. Nina, and Laura Tryon, and Kathy, along with family and friends, thank you for coming by. And finally, Cindy. I hope that you had a good time here, and I will leave us with the look at the moon behind the clouds with a so long. Be safe, stay healthy, and definitely, for sure, get outdoors.